Howdy and welcome to Rauta's Worst to Best lists. This time we go all the way to United States of America with a band called Judas Iscariot. Now this is a band I learned along the way, maybe some late 90s, can't exactly pinpoint the year, but say roughly 1998 or so when I first heard the band, and since that it has been one of my all-time favorites from United States black metal scene. Why so? Because the style is very raw black metal, sometimes the playing is just horrible, and there's not even too much variety between different albums, let alone songs. Still, or maybe in fact because of this, being very consistent in style and only having a career of 10 years, Judas Iscariot proved to be one of those kind of cornerstones of American black metal, for me anyway, and only because, being this kind of a stronghold of raw black metal with no compromises except for the rather sloppy playing on the first albums, the band, or kind of a project because it was mostly a solo project, was in fact doing a good album after a good album after, well, you get the idea. And that means there are no weak links in my opinion, at least in the terms of quality of the albums, that is songwriting, and even the production, which is kind of a raw and not exactly something like mainstream, is clean, nice and crisp and blah blah blah, but just sticking to the kind of a very basics of black metal. And as such, it is indeed still one of my favorite bands coming from the United States when we're talking about black metal. So let's enter the band's metal archive site. Now this gonna be a little bit boring, worst to best, because of various reasons. First of all, there are bands where I have mentioned these kind of letter shapes, like W, bands starting up, then going down, then going back again, and you get the idea. Or bands which go like a letter J, start relatively okay, then go down, and only to climb up higher. For example, bands like Celtic Frost, in a way, is J, especially if you kind of put morbid tales out of the equation or list. And then there are bands like M, first not so great, then going up, then going down, back again, and up and down. And N, A letter, V, all kind of stuff. And that usually implies there's a lot of changes throughout the course of the band's discography, like band changing too much in the wrong direction, sometimes band turning into better direction, sometimes playing comes better, sometimes lineup changes and all that happen. But that is not the case with Judas Iscariot. And when I say this is kind of a boring, is that there is no real letter I could go with this one. First of all, there is not so much difference in terms of quality when it comes from the weakest to the best ones. They are relatively close to each other, in my opinion anyway, when it comes to the music. So because of all the albums are quite the same, quite similar in style, and there is not so much changes in quality or consistency and all that stuff, one could say this is a kind of a boring discography, at least in terms like, hey, we really don't have twists and turns to make it all interesting. And that is why I'm having this kind of a long introduction, because all the albums are pretty much the same. Raw black metal with not so much like ballad type of songwriting. There are no too big changes, no lineup changes or whatsoever to have this like, okay, you didn't see this one coming. So it's all about just one man basically having his vision come through and then disbanding. So it all started in 1992 with a little bit different name, Heidegger as the philosopher. And that love of philosophy is kind of shown because, Judas Iscariot has songs like Nietzsche. So they are a strong connection to philosophy, yet that is not so much maybe shown in the lyrical themes, even though nihilism very much connects with certain philosophers, especially the German type, Nietzsche, maybe Heidegger as well. But anyway, this is something that soon after the band changed its name, first demos out in 1992 and 1993, and then all these full lengths in a relatively short span of time. 1996, 2 albums out. Then you have Of Great Eternity in 97, and also a couple of more albums in 1999. Then there is this kind of a remake of an album 2002, which I'm just gonna skip because it's not a new album anymore. And then the final album 2002 with the Embrace the Corpse's Bleeding. And only after that a couple of EPs, for example Moonlight Butchery, one of the best ones that ever came out under the name of Judas Iscariot, but there is nothing after that. So basically it was only 10 years of existence and all was done under the name of Judas Iscariot. Rest in peace and all that stuff. So which way to go really to have a band that has no weak albums, and even the best albums are not actually super great, even though in my opinion they are definitely right there to challenge the kind of classics of black metal, no matter what the country. I would say the first one is on the bottom of the list. The Cold Earth Slept Below. And for the couple of reasons. While I love the riffs, while I love the very kind of a demo-ish raw production, the thing here is the playing, especially on the drum side, is kind of horrible. One could even say it's really, really sloppy. Some people don't mind it, and that probably explains why this has relatively high average score here in Metal Archives as well. And to be honest, I would say this is 8 out of 10 of an album. Because of the songwriting, because of the riffs and the great raw vocals, and the production is really, really fitting. So the only problem with this album is, in fact, the kind of a horrible drumming. That is not so much fixed with the Dying Light, which came out later on. But the very same things, both good and bad, are very much present there. This is only a tiny bit of better than The Cold Earth Slept Below. For the same reasons. The drumming is a little bit better, but you really can't say it's wow. And it was actually quite a while until Judas Iscariot had a proper drumming. And in fact, while that got, better all the way, it still didn't mean so much in terms of songwriting and all that stuff. Also the early works, especially until like halfway through, maybe even further, what in my opinion was one of the problems is that Judas Iscariot had this habit of having kind of a boring ending track. Not exactly an outro, but kind of a thing that was like, okay, you should not maybe have included that. That is something of a habit which took place on some of the albums, but not all. But because there are no great differences, yeah, it's pretty straightforward from here. Except for the fact that I wouldn't go for Of Great Eternity right after these two ones, but Distant in Solitary Night. It's a little bit better once again than the two previous ones, because overall it's just a little bit better. Once again, the drums are more like progressing, but not exactly progressive, and the overall style is pretty much the same. Once you find one album that you like, the rest is pretty much going the same ways. Then followed by Heaven in Flames. Actually, these two are kind of interchangeable. Doesn't really matter in which order I would put them, and I would be fine with them. Which then again leaves only a couple of albums. And I was very much like undecided which one would actually be it. Because the Cold Earth Slept Below on the bottom of the list of these, 6 albums. Then Thy Dying Light. Then Distant and Solitary Nights and Heaven in Flames. And then there is only two left. To Embrace Corpse's Bleeding, Of Great Eternity. Now, first of all, for a long time, I seem to be one of the special guys here in the terms of putting that on the top of the list, where this seems to be, on average, the weakest ones, according to other people. And it's fine, I get it. It's kind of a more atmospheric in Judas Iscariot style, and that's why it probably clicks me a little bit more. Don't get me wrong, I love strong, raw riffing, where it's just kind of a violent, barbaric, and straight to the point, primitive. But there's something that I think clicks with me of Great Eternity. And to compare that with To Embrace Corpse's Bleeding is kind of hard, because first of all, To Embrace has the best drumming on the whole album-wise of Judas Iscariot. And the production is actually a little bit crispier towards the end. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily better or more fitting for this kind of music. Because like I said, all of these albums have quite fitting production. But maybe I have to change my mind how I figured out before giving this bunch of albums another listen before making this video was like, I was expecting Of Great Eternity to still be the number one. But I have to kind of change my opinion about that and put To Embrace the Corpse's Bleeding on the top spot. Maybe because the drumming is so much more intense and maybe because it's actually a little bit better produced. And by better produced, I mean, the actual powerful output that is right there with the album. So to recap the whole idea, everything on this list goes from 8 out of 10 to 8.5 out of 10 in my opinion. So as you can figure out, having 6 albums so close to each other and not having these big gaps in terms of quality and consistency and all that stuff, it's kind of hard. I mean, I could just go into different days and say, maybe this is today better, or maybe these are just quite equal. So it's more like 4 albums on the same level and only a couple of albums being a little better. That's roughly how I feel about it. And that is actually a big compliment, because this is one of those rare bands that I would be totally comfortable of having all the albums in my collection and not having the feeling like, okay, this is actually just a placeholder album. Because there are lots of good bands where I feel I don't need to have every album in the discography because the quality isn't right there. But Judas Iscariot is, in fact, one of those bands that whatever album from the discography I pick and put in my CD player and start listening, I'm like, yes, this is a good and solid band. So, To Embrace the Corpse's Bleeding takes the top spot for me anyway, followed by Of Great Eternity. And then pretty much the order of, chronological order, from The Cold Earth Below, The Dying Light, Distant in Solitary Nights, Heaven in Flames, followed by Of Great Eternity, and finally To Embrace. That's my view of Judas Iscariot as whole. A really good band, and it's a shame that it ceased to exist after 10 years. Wish they did, or he did, more music after that. But maybe there is a natural course to every band, and sometimes bands don't get it. They probably should have quit before it gets sour, but this is not the kind of band. So in case you never gave Judas Iscariot a chance, there is still plenty of time to do it. For the record, I was actually listening to a lot of these albums on Spotify while being at the gym, driving my car. So the discography is very, very listenable without actually buying physical products in case you really need to check out before you buy. But be it as it may, I can strongly recommend Judas Iscariot to your listening pleasure, especially if you're into raw end of black metal. A great band that once again reigned in my player and can't nothing but recommend it. Give it a chance, and I hope you like it. Take care. Bye-bye.